In this video, I'm going to teach you how to train for the handstand push-up. This is a very difficult movement to achieve, but even training for it will build a lot of strength in your shoulders, triceps, and upper chest. Additionally, this movement requires a lot of stability from your wrists, forearms, and your core. If you're a total beginner to calisthenics, I recommend first watching my previous video for beginners so you can learn the foundational exercises before moving on to this movement. You don't actually need to be able to hold a handstand before training this movement. This is actually one of the ways that you can get your first handstand, although it might not be the easiest. That being said, if you can do 25 push-ups and 15 dips in a row with good form, you're ready to start squatting on your hands. Mobility requirements. A lot of these exercises require a decent amount of overhead shoulder mobility. Being able to reach up above your head with your arms is extremely important for maintaining a good line in a handstand. Next, a lot of the earlier exercises require a good amount of flexibility in your hamstrings, so do not skip your hamstring stretches. And finally, the handstand push-up requires you to tuck in your elbows and open up your shoulders in a overhead position. If you happen to be lacking flexibility in any of these areas, I highly recommend doing a couple sets during your warm-up before doing your strength movements, as this will expand your ranges of motion, decrease the amount of pain that you'll feel during your session, and lower your risk of injury. Now, once you're aware of any mobility or flexibility limitations, you're ready to jump into the strengthening progressions. The exercises I'm about to list can be viewed almost as levels in a game, in which you should meet a certain set of requirements before moving on to the next level to guarantee safety and consistent progress. The following exercises can all be done on the floor with no equipment, but I do recommend getting yourself a pair of push-up bars or parallettes, as using these puts your wrists in a more neutral position, gives you more control while you are balancing, and also prevents your wrists from being a limiting factor in your training. Having some higher parallettes will also give you more range of motion and allow you to go deeper in your push-ups. So level 1 is the pike push-up. Much like a regular push-up, you want your elbows tucked in instead of flaring out. Something to help with this is to think about turning your elbow pits forward when you are doing them. If you're new to the pike push-up, you can start in a regular push-up position, and with each rep, walk slightly closer to your hands with your feet while keeping your legs as straight as possible. By bringing your feet closer to your wrists, you are inverting your upper body more and more, and you're actually getting close to what an actual handstand push-up feels like. When you go down, you want to bring your nose to a point in front of your hands rather than directly in between, and when you come back up, you want to tuck your head in between your shoulders and reach high up with your arms as much as you can. Be patient with the stage, because whatever form you use for the pike push-up will also determine the form that you use for the handstand push-up. To help establish good habits, film yourself from the front and side angles. In this stage, you should also start getting used to what it feels like to balance your entire body weight on your hands. The easiest way to do this is by performing what's called a Frogstand, where you rest your inner thigh onto your elbows with your arms slightly bent, and experimenting with micro movements in your wrist to stop yourself from falling. Once you can perform 3 sets of 12 of pike push-ups as well as a 15-second Frogstand hold, you can move on to the next progression, which is the elevated pike push-up. Find a surface in which you can prop your feet up while performing this movement, still keeping your legs straight and your upper body form the same as you were before. By elevating your feet on progressively higher and higher surfaces, you are shifting more of your body weight onto your arms, strengthening them to be able to push your entire body weight in the future. At this point, you can also start to build up your handstand by performing wall-assisted handstands with your stomach facing the wall. Some things to consider here. You can leave some space between the wall and your hands to prevent yourself from falling over, and you're also going to want to lock out your arms, elevate your shoulders, and look in front of your hands. Try to stack your hips directly above your wrists and only keep your toes against the wall with your core tight. Set a goal for about 3 sets of 60 seconds of wall handstand holds and 3 sets of 12 reps for elevated pike push-ups before you move on. Now, if you've never done handstands before, your brain might have this natural response of panic whenever you enter an upside down position due to the fear of falling. Now, I'm going to be real with you and say that you're more than likely to fall several times during your handstand journey, but I'm going to teach you how to fall correctly and safely. Learning how to correctly bail out of a handstand and actually practicing falling is the best way to get over this fear. So what I do is if I feel like I'm about to fall over in a handstand, I would pick a side to fall towards instead of falling straight through. Whichever side I want to land on, I release my arm pressure for that side, so I end up in an almost half cartwheel, so I always land on my feet. Practice this until you don't have the panic moment anymore. Once you've completed this level, you can move on to the next progression, which is handstand push-ups against the wall. From the wall-assisted handstand, you want to slowly descend, focusing on only keeping your toes sliding against the wall and maintaining a straight body line, and aim to touch your nose in front of your hands just like you would in a pike push-up. If you're doing this properly, as in you're not excessively flaring out your elbows, your body should be moving in a slightly diagonal movement pattern rather than straight up and down. At this point, you are pushing pretty much your entire body weight with your hands in a handstand push-up motion, so what's left is really just learning the balance. You can begin to practice the balancing motion of a freestanding handstand by lifting your legs slowly off of the wall from a wall-assisted handstand position. Make sure your hips are stacked directly above your wrists and start lifting your legs off of the wall one by one to the point where you can hold a suspended handstand position without any assistance. Once you are able to hold the freestanding handstand position for at least 5 to 10 seconds, and you're able to do 3 sets of 12 reps of wall-assisted handstand push-ups, you can move on to the next progression. At this point, you should have enough strength in your pike push-ups to lift your feet off of the ground at the bottom. As your hands will be directly under your center of gravity for you to lift off of the ground, you're going to want to lean enough forward at the bottom position so that your legs naturally pick up off the ground. The goal here is to hold this floating pike position for as long as you can. When you're comfortable enough with balancing this position, slowly start extending your legs out behind you as to not throw off your balance to enter what's called the bent arm handstand. Try to keep your head above your hands so that it'll be easier to push into a regular handstand from this position. Now you should be ready to attempt the upward motion of a handstand push-up with the help of some momentum. Enter the floating pike as you normally would, but now try to kick upwards with your legs to generate momentum and at the same time push up as hard as you can with your arms. At first, you might not shoot up into a perfectly vertical handstand, and you'll fall into either one of two categories: overshooting or undershooting. Overshooting is usually caused by too much of an arch in your lower back or a bend in the legs when you reach the handstand position. Make sure to keep your abs activated and your legs straight to prevent this from happening. Now, undershooting can be caused by having your elbows too far behind your wrists, or you're extending your legs and arms too early before allowing your hips to stack above your shoulders, or you lack overhead shoulder mobility to reach that last portion of a handstand. To prevent this, when you're in the uppermost range of motion and you're about to lock out your arms, think about pushing your shoulders up to your ears and also pushing from the back of your hand. After practicing this movement for a while, you'll be able to go up slower and slower in a more controlled fashion, and you'll be able to lock in a handstand at the top considering that you've been practicing your handstand holds off of the wall. At this point, you can also practice the descending motion of a handstand push-up by either starting from the wall and lowering down slowly without any assistance, or you can try adding a negative after you kick up into a handstand from a pike push-up. Over time, focus on doing the negative portion of the handstand push-ups slower and slower, and eventually you'll be able to pause in the bent arm handstand position. And finally, if you're able to enter a handstand, lower down and then push back up without losing your balance, you have achieved the handstand push-up. Congratulations. I will now move on to the conditioning exercises. These are movements of lower intensity and work on smaller muscle groups that are used in the handstand push-up, and you should do these after you're completed with your strength work for the day to help you address any limitations that you might have. The hollow body hold is great for conditioning your core and it involves laying on your back and lifting your legs off of the ground. Next is the Superman hold, which is basically a reverse hollow body hold where you want to lift your arms and your feet off of the ground while laying on your stomach. This is incredibly helpful for conditioning your lower back and also conditioning your arm elevation to allow for a straighter line in a handstand. Next up is the L-sit, which is a great exercise for strengthening your core at a compressed angle. Reverse leg extensions, which are great for keeping your handstand stable and conditioning the movement of extending your legs behind your back while entering a handstand. And finally, you can never go wrong with banded or dumbbell bicep curls and tricep extensions to condition the stability of your arms. Now I'm going to show you how I would structure a handstand push-up training session. You're always going to want to start with a warm-up for at least 10 to 15 minutes where you simply just move the joints that you're going to be using as much as you can to get the blood flowing. Skipping your warm-up is only going to make your training session more difficult and increasing your likelihood of injury. If you have mobility limitations such as in your shoulders or hamstrings, you can address these by doing a couple sets of dynamic stretches during your warm-up. You can also practice your balancing movements before you jump into your strength sets, as it is a great way to warm up. After you're completely warmed up, I would ramp up to the hardest progression that I am working on by doing a few reps of the progressions in increasing difficulty. After this, I would do between 3 to 6 sets of the hardest progression that I'm working on. These sets can also be attempts if you can't do a single rep yet. I recommend keeping your rep numbers between the 2 and 6 rep range. When you're done with these, I would move down a progression and do 3 sets of 80% of my max capacity of the previous progression, and I would repeat for the next preceding progression. And finally, I would pick 2 exercises from the conditioning section to complete my workout. If you still feel like you have a lot of mobility limitations, you can address these by doing static stretches post-workout. Anyways, that is all from me for this tutorial. If you have more questions or suggestions, please leave them down in the comments below. You can also feel free to join my Discord server if you want to discuss anything related to bodyweight training, or if you want to share your progress or ask questions to other people in the community. Anyways, thank you for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.